Hello everyone, I'm Jason,
And I'm Sam.
and welcome back to Doctor Who.
Controversial.
Today we are going to be talking about the very controversial subject of the 14th Doctor. So the first ones we've done have been very much based around the newer side of Doctor Who, so this
And
kind of
this is,
squares it off quite
yeah,
nicely.
which will then lead into a depth conversation about the 60th as a whole. So we'll be covering a lot of the topics that we've already mentioned in a lot more detail.
Yes, yeah, because as we know, we can go off on a
You
tangent
can
with
go
things.
off and off and off.
Yeah, so the 60th one will be a longer conversation.
Yeah.
Um, so again, as I was saying, if you've heard the one we talked about Donna, um, the 10th Doctor, one of my favourites at the time, absolutely loved him, and was kind of excited about the 14th Doctor to an extent. I was nervous, and I feel to an extent kind of rightly so.
And this is probably a good point to actually say, because you've already kind of alluded to what you think of the 10th Doctor. And for me, interestingly enough, to say that he is the Doctor I grew up with probably most.
Hmm.
It's probably the Doctor I have the least affinity to of all the new series,
Right.
which is very interesting because it's not like I don't like him, it's just one I have the least connection to.
Yeah.
Like Ninth Doctor is because it was the first Doctor, so most people have a very strong connection to the first Doctor. So,
Yeah.
uh, and because I was like you were saying where you were very emotional when it came to the end of time.
Yeah.
I wasn't that emotional, which, but I was in Time of the Doctor,
Right.
and I wasn't again when I watched was for anyone who doesn't know of it already, when it came to the 12th Doctor, I saw pretty much Series 8 and Series 9, then didn't really see that much of Series 10 properly,
Yeah.
and came back to it a few years later, very much like I know what you've said that you had a very similar sort of thing with the 12th
Yeah.
Doctor, and then saw Twice Upon a Time, really liked that,
Yeah.
and liked Power of the Doctor as well.
Yeah.
So it's a very weird thing. It's not like I have any kind of dislike for 10th Doctor other than the fact that I feel like he's very much overrepresented
I agree he's
in
overrepresented.
in the wider world of Doctor Who and Doctor Who fandom,
Yeah.
which is probably why when the 13th Doctor regenerates into the 14th Doctor, who is the Lieutenant, I was like, okay, where are we going with this? So I was much more muted on it. I was like, okay, interesting, but very much sort of like with I, I could always see it being something that was much more of a potential misstep than probably most people thought it. Even people critical of it probably
Yeah.
wanted it to be because for me, one of the things that I've always thought is that the Doctor should never regenerate into a past Doctor because this is particularly if you uh, are aware of when really ever since the I think it's the 12th Doctor, uh, whenever a Doctor's regenerated, it's always been, oh, it could be David Tennant, oh, it could be Matt Smith, it could be, and it was always very much for the sake of let's bring back the good old days.
Yeah.
And I feel like this kind of by bringing the 10th Doctor back as the 14th Doctor, where it's very superficially different.
Yeah.
Uh, it feels very much like it's playing into that far too much, and it's very damaging to Doctor Who in the long run because it sets precedent.
Yeah. That is a concern because if we've done that, it can happen
Yeah,
again. And
and I'm already seeing a lot of people, particularly around the 10th and 11th Doctor, say, wouldn't it be good if this Doctor, if this person who played the Doctor came back at this point in time, something like that,
yeah,
and
and it's not really
yeah,
what it's.
it's starting to when that starts happening, it feels like Doctor's starting to eat its own tail and basically dies the mythology because it's becoming self-absorbed.
Yeah.
Which as soon as the mythology does that, it dies.
Yeah. And just because you would want it to happen in your head doesn't mean it's the right thing to
Things
do.
like
It's the same as if you have broken up with somebody or somebody's passed away.
yeah,
You want to see them again sometimes
but
in a breakup,
yeah,
but it's not going to be the right thing. It's not
yeah,
the right thing for you to move forward. And obviously, if somebody's passed away, as David Tennant's original
Doctor,
Doctor had done, so Ten had already died.
yeah,
going back to it, and like you say, it was very superficial.
Yeah,
He was the 10th Doctor. It
yeah,
just and
and
bringing Donna back as well made it
yeah,
even more so.
yeah, and there were some bits of it where it's like, oh yeah, he's not as egotistical as he was as the Seventh Doctor and things like that, but it's not really noticeable.
No, no.
And
See, it wasn't always egotistical.
no,
It was sometimes,
yeah,
but not all the time. And there were times that he was much more humble.
yeah,
Um, obviously, not at very certain
at
in certain
certain
times.
points
Like the
which
time Lord
we know,
Victorious probably
yes,
would be his
a
damn
certain trip to
point.
Mars.
Yeah, changing the whole history of the Mars mission. Um, but for me, it had such a bittersweet feeling to it because I got the Doctor back that I really enjoyed, but at the same time, it was bringing something back that was already gone from
Yeah,
me. And like I said with the Donna one, if you've
yeah,
listened to the Donna video, the Donna conversation that we had, I said goodbye in a very emotional way
yeah,
to 10. So I suppose I could deal with it a little bit better because of telling myself that he wasn't the same. It was 14. He
yeah.
wasn't 10. It's a new Doctor. But watching it still felt like I was watching. That I was still watching 10, and it made it very complicated
Very
emotionally.
jarring.
But yeah, it didn't. I just don't. I don't think it was also necessary. I
No.
think the whole reason they've given for it is that Shooty got well,
Yeah.
it was he had other commitments
Yeah.
and they wanted to do the 60th.
Yeah.
We'll do another Doctor then.
Yeah.
Create another. It didn't matter who that Doctor was. It didn't
Yeah.
necessarily need to be David
Yeah.
Tennant.
It's
And
like
the problem as well was the writing side of it from Russell T Davies's perspective. Certainly felt like it was just nostalgia dumping
yeah,
almost.
and it was very much even within that the entire system, it feels very. It doesn't. It feels like it's only harkening back to one specific moment of Doctor Who. It references other moments in Doctor Who, and it alludes to them through bringing back the time making things like that,
Yeah.
and the puppet show, as we've said.
Hmm.
But apart from that, it's pretty much series four.
Yeah.
Series four continued.
Yeah.
And I didn't mind that actually for the Starbase. Okay, it's doing a homage to Series 4, and that makes sense because you've got the 14th Doctor and you've got Donna Noble back. Makes sense. Then, when we got onto Wild 300, which I really liked as an episode, it didn't feel right because of how much it's just very much the Doctor and Donna and doesn't really feel like it needs to be in an anniversary year.
No.
I feel like you could just have it in any ordinary series and it'd be do a Doctor and a companion reflecting on how much well they know each other.
Yeah. And it was again that was a nostalgia thing in itself because the conversations they were having, although weren't always talking about, well, very little talking about their past, but it was very much about them
Yeah.
coming to terms with the time period they'd not been with each other.
Yeah.
For him being not existing,
Yeah.
and for her the time that she'd not remembered him. And I just felt for me it ended with it feeling just like it was just nostalgia for nostalgia's sake.
Yeah.
And then obviously when the bi-generation thing happened, it felt
Yeah.
like it was just doing it so you can extend David Tennant's tenure as 14.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, and we both kind of said actually that when the 14th Doctor is going to regenerate, it is actually really well done because he goes, "I'm ready to go now," and which 10th Doctor is, "I don't want to go,"
Yeah.
and says he looks like he wants to go.
Yeah.
All this and the other. So
I think in retrospect, I would feel better about his. No, I know I would. I would feel much better if that had been the end of
yeah.
Tennant's tenure as Doctor Who in general.
Yeah.
Unless you were going back and doing multiple Doctor sequences as we've had previously, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I kind of felt cheated to an extent. I felt cheated of the original death.
Yeah.
And then cheated of this one.
Yeah, because it's I slipped out of it.
Yeah, which I think has now made me feel the way I feel about it. Because I'm not sure I felt the way that I feel now while I was watching it. I don't think I did. I think I was quite happy with it as that was going on.
Yeah.
Because I assumed that he would regenerate,
not
bi-generate. So therefore, I feel like he was going to. It didn't feel right that he was finally ready to let go of everything, and then didn't.
And going back and thinking about it from a more technical point of view, where do you go to the 14th Doctor now? He's got his narrative arc is resolved, but he's still alive. So what do you introduce to him other than an external conflict where it's like a big monster to fight
Yeah.
at some point, and even then, it actually, unless people around him die, that's not really going to. And even then, that's a very
Again, this is why I don't think they should. And as we've said, I think we know they're going to use David Tennant again. I think they shouldn't, because I don't want to know what's happening in his life. Because I actually want to think of him now, because I've been forced into thinking this way, that he is just living his life with Donna, ever so often using the TARDIS to go and take Rose to Mars. That's great, but I don't want to see it. I don't want to. I don't want to be part of that. I need David Tennant's tenure to be over.
But also one of the things I've heard people say when people talk about it, that being in that situation, is that, well, if the Earth gets attacked, the Doctor's not going to do that, and he's going to get involved. It's like you kind of left the Doctor in a situation where, yes, he's for all intents and purposes retired, but what happens when the other Doctor, because there's by official continuity, there's two. By unofficial continuity, aka commentary,
477.
There's God knows how many X amount to be inserted.
Every living being in the universe
later.
Every Gallifreyan is now a Time Lord. Obviously, every
Gallifreyan is now a Doctor.
Yeah.
So there's that whole situation, and so it undermines him as a character now, no matter what you do, because he's got no internal conflict left to run through.
Yeah.
Or conflict that can feed into him, because he's resolved all of his internal issues.
Yeah.
So, and then the only thing left is an external issue, which is big alien invasion.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose, and this is where again the only way I can see it going is a death stopping an alien invasion, which would fall very flat. Like and with every Doctor's regeneration, it's always had either been very personal to that Doctor or had a very big impact on them. So it's like with the first Doctor, it's the Doctor getting old and it's introducing the concept of regeneration.
Yeah.
Second Doctor, who is by this point is the Doctor who's basically going to go into search and get involved. Like he jokes about it. He jokes and says, "I do have a tendency to get involved in things," and I think it's Jamie's companion goes, "Oh yeah, you can say that again." And then, so when he regenerates, he's forced to regenerate because of his actions of getting involved too much. The third Doctor, it's all around him paying for a past mistake he made and facing his fears.
Yeah.
Fourth Doctor is a bit of an odd one in that he forms a telescope. Yeah, Fourth Doctor's a bit odd. The fifth Doctor's is him sacrificing his life to save a companion, which is very which is very much the logical endpoint of the fifth Doctor's story. Sixth Doctor again is a bit of an odd one in that he gets shot and his TARDIS gets shot from a planet with a big cannon essentially, and at one point the actual reason for regenerating wasn't that he got shot, the TARDIS got shot, it was that he banged his head on the TARDIS console. Seventh Doctor's shot by gangsters. Eighth Doctor is technically dead and is forced to regenerate to continue being alive into the War Doctor.
Yeah.
War Doctor, we know it's all he is wearing a bit thin and old. Ninth Doctor, we all know, so on.
Yeah.
So each Doctor's death is always very personal. It's always very
meaningful
to the meta narrative of that Doctor. Most of the time, you get odd ones like the Fourth Doctor and Sixth Doctor, but Sixth Doctor was definitely more situational to the time of Doctor Who's production.
Yeah. So whereas it would have meant so much more if but I think it's that thing of trying to keep the continuation of something going on, which happens a lot within Doctor Who generally.
Yeah.
As we've had conversations about companions, that they hardly ever actually die.
Yeah. Particularly the modern series.
Yeah. That's what I mean. In the new era, the pre-new era.
The pre-new era.
the middle era.
Yeah. The 2005 to 2022 run.
Yes. So there's not that. It's very rare that you get that. In it where there is an actual finalisation of somebody actually dying. There's always a way around it.
Yeah, and most of the time I actually don't mind that. It's just that what happens when you actually move them beyond those consequences.
Yeah, and that's what's happened with. But the Doctor's the one where actually his deaths have always been final.
Yeah.
To an extent. Um,
And they've always had a consequence in that he literally comes back as a new person.
yeah, so it's just I think it's a shame that I could so, as with the bi-generation conversation that we've had on these, I don't have an issue with the bi-generation in itself, but I do because of what it did with with David Tennant as a Doctor, because
And
it didn't give me the ending that I wanted and was satisfied with. I don't
Yeah.
have an issue with bi-generation, just
yeah, and
the
it's
lack of consequences
yeah,
on the back
and
of it.
it's very much probably even more so for you because it feels like it's very much rewarding a certain portion of the Doctor Who fan base where it's like, oh, because, and I was kind of saying this at the time when it was coming up to the giggle, I saw on social media that there's a Doctor Who post saying who's ready for the 14th Doctor to go, and there were loads of comments saying, I don't want David to go again, and it's like, oh Jesus.
Yeah, which is not how I saw it.
Yeah.
Where as much as I really wanted him to, I was really happy with his
Yeah.
original Doctor, the 10th
Yeah.
Doctor, and I wasn't majorly concerned about him coming back because I assumed it meant a decent end for him.
Yeah.
I wasn't. That's what had curbed my concern about it.
Yeah.
So having him then not
Yeah.
come to an end and leave it open ended.
Yeah. And it very much plays into kind of what when we've had conversations around 1984 and we being very similar.
Yeah.
It's very much playing into that kind of thing of it feels like it's very much rewarding the wrong thing.
Yes. Yeah. It's just doing it for the sake of it, or doing
Yeah.
it because of the fact that you as a writer want to do it,
Yeah.
or the fan base that you are listening to say that they want this, and
Yeah.
you know you're going to keep that part of the fan base really happy.
Yeah.
Um,
But then the question is how big is that actual fan base?
just because they're shouting the loudest doesn't necessarily
Because
mean.
we've had many conversations about that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a bittersweet situation. It was
Yeah.
lovely seeing him back, and I enjoyed him being back.
Yeah, and for me, it was very much a case of his back, but it needs to be under certain conditions, and
Those conditions weren't met.
yeah, and it's very much a case of, well, what do you do with him now? Because unless he dies in a really stupid way,
Yeah.
that's where it's almost like it's in the clipping of a brick or some nonsense. I'm being melodramatic. But it's like there's no way he can actually have a meaningful death now, unless it's a case of the whole
Another one.
Yeah. Or is it a case of that the bi-generation means that he's alive but only for so long, and then all of a sudden he's going to just be, my time's up now, and just drop dead. In which case, that kind of defeats the purpose of bi-generation.
I'm intrigued to see where they go with it. Like we've said, we know that he's going to be in it again. We know that there is a hologram coming of him very soon, which is implying that there's going to be more of him.
Yeah.
So I'd be intrigued to see where they go with it to an extent, but I'm not particularly happy about it.
Yeah.
It's not, and it feels awful for the fact that I absolutely loved 10.
And it's like with me, you can kind of see my reaction to it because never had that strong connection with 10th Doctor. Who's always with the other Doctors, ironically.
Yeah.
Someone who grew up most of the 10th Doctor.
Yeah. But we've come to the same conclusion that it doesn't work, and we're not not particularly happy about it, but for very different reasons.
Yeah.
And that's not a great place to be
it
from RTD's perspective.
It shows that you've got two different aspects of fan opinion which are actually united. It's like
the end result is united, yet the way we've come from it is different, and I think that is the majority of the fan base on it.
And when we get into the 60th, this will probably become more apparent with me, is that my main anxiety with Doctor Who is that not necessarily I'll still not that I won't enjoy it, but it's that it will be very much limited by a lot of these things which are happening where it's like, okay, it's decent, but it's not the right way to go around it.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're going to leave it there, and the next one will be the 60th, which will be sort of looking at most of the
much longer version of these rather short conversations we've had so far.
Thank you very much, and we hope to hear you. I say that every time, I don't mean hear you. Hopefully you will be listening to us again soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.